Thanks so much for coming to this session. We're going to talk a little bit about some best practices to fuel growth for next year. I know a lot of us are thinking about plans for 2025. So my goal here is to really hopefully give you some key insights, some best practices that you can take and bring back as you think about strategies for next year. Before we dive in, always find it helpful to give a little bit of context about myself, just so you know who the speaker is and their background and kind of why they're here. So I'm the CMO for Customer.io. I joined the company about 2 years ago, but I've been in tech for a decade plus before that, and did also spend some time as a strategy consultant. So that context, a little bit about that. My strategy consulting work focused a lot around helping traditional media companies adapt to new media technology. Part of that work leaned really heavily into the analytics side. So that's where I kind of got this passion for being data-driven in my decision-making. But the part that I was missing and why I kind of wanted to move towards tech was I loved products. I loved telling stories about products and the value that it can deliver. For the marketers in the room, that's probably part of the reason that you got into the profession that you did. And so for me, I've always thought about my role as how do I marry together, analytics and being data-driven into a storytelling approach. And so that was kind of what drew me to Customer.io in the first place. Because Customer.io, we are a customer engagement platform. And so we are really built and designed to help teams build these really powerful data-driven journeys that drive action and drive impact. So I've been at Customer.io for about 2 years or so. But as I mentioned, I've spent about a decade plus in tech. I've worked in big companies. I spent some time at Microsoft. I was in the Office 365 group there when that product launched. So I was able to learn how to actually market and sell a cloud solution. Also realized I wasn't a big company guy. And so I've really focused on the kind of mid-stage, high-growth startup area. After Microsoft, I spent about 4.5 years at Dropbox. I was the second product marketer. I joined the Dropbox marketing team when it was in its infancy, and was able to see that through the IPO process. And so that knowledge really kind of gave me the, I would say, energy and excitement to go and try to replicate that at other startups in the past. So I've worked since then 3 different startups, and so I've really, I think, honed how I like to think about growth and what really is necessary to drive growth. So a lot of what you're going to see here, I think, is going to be a mix of things that I'm really passionate about with like data that we see in our platform plus market trends to really drive impact. So hopefully you'll be able to leave with some really powerful insights. This is a workshop, so it's not me presenting to you. I want to try to make this at least interactive in parts. So you will see a few kind of questions sprinkled in just to try to help drive some engagement. Maybe by show of hands, how many people here feel really confident about their strategy for next year? All right, exactly. That's why I want you to be here. So clearly, I think even myself, there's some nervousness around what we're going to do in 2025. And so it's important that we think about all of the ways in which we can unlock the most value quickly. What is any volunteers or anyone that feels brave want to share some of the obstacles or some of the pain points that maybe they're feeling about campaign development and execution for next year? Anybody want to be brave? Please.
I guess tracking and attribution.
Okay. Yes. Common topic that I think we all marketers feel about around measurement and attribution. Always an important piece, especially if you want to be data driven. You got to find out ways in which you can measure there. Any other brave souls out there that are willing to open up, please? Okay. So yes. Just since we're recording, I want to make sure they hear that. So I'll just repeat these. But yeah, the macroeconomic environment, like how is that going to impact demand? And what does that mean for us as teams and how can we be more efficient? I think that's something that I think we've all been feeling for sure. Any maybe one more? Anybody else have one last topic they want to dive into? Please.
Maybe accessibility and usability of user data for personalization.
Oh, I love that. We're going to talk about that, which is great. So the comment here was just around accessibility and usability of data to drive personalization. Personalization is going to be a key topic of today's discussion. Amazing. All right. Well, then with that, we'll kind of dive in here. You know, a lot of what you articulated as some of your pain points, and I'm guessing what some of you are feeling is really the impetus behind why Customer I/O was started. So our mission statement is around transforming the way companies communicate with customers. And so that's the thing that we're really passionate about. That's this big aspirational goal that we're trying to drive. And, you know, communication is so important to solving a lot of the pain points that were articulated here, or just, you know, common pain points that we face as marketers or as growth teams or as app development teams. And Customer I/O has built a platform to try to solve that for marketing and growth teams. And what we've tried to do is take some of the core components that are necessary to drive data-driven campaigns and build it into a single solution. And I'll talk more about some of the specifics of this later. But because we have this platform, we are now trusted by more than 7,400 brands. So what that does is that we have a lot of data around what works and what doesn't work as it relates to messaging and communication. So what we're going to talk about today is not just my personal opinions about this. This is grounded in the trends that we see from our customer data, from market research that we've done. So just have that confidence and that conviction that what we're going to be talking about are things that are grounded in solid understanding of how brands like to work. And so, you know, what we want to talk today about is what is necessary for you to win in 2025. And, you know, a lot of times the best way to project what's going to happen in the future is by looking back and looking around what's working now. And so what I want to do is I want to dive into some best practices that I think are really important that we've seen in our business, that we've seen in some of the research that we've done. And I want to try to articulate kind of what that means so you can get some specificity around how this actually works in practice. So, you know, if you've been a marketer before, there's a common phrase that has been shared. I think since I've studied marketing back in college, it was marketers need to deliver the right message at the right time for the right audience. And so you hear that and you're like, of course, yeah, that's what I do. But what does that actually mean in today's environment? And so what I want to do is I want to take the components of this adage that we all are familiar with and try to break it down for what it means for a modern marketer. And so when we look at this, the first part of this, when you hear the right message, I want you to think personalized. That is what is now important and what is required for you to deliver that right message. There's a stat from Dynata that said 84% of customers are more likely to buy from a company that offers a personalized experience. And so in the end, like our responsibility is to drive impact for the business. So if you want to do that, you're going to need to be personalized. We also just released just yesterday our state of messaging report. And this was a survey that we did of over 500 marketers and growth professionals across the globe. And it also looks at our own internal data. So we aggregated all of the data that we had on our platform. Just to put it in perspective, last year we sent over 35 billion messages. So a lot of data that we're able to parse out and see what some of those insights were. So, you know, we found in our data that 90% of brands say personalization is the key to creating meaningful relationships. So if you think about any type of application that you have, it needs to be grounded in that trust between, you know, that audience and what you're able to deliver, and personalization is going to be a key. And 42% of brands, when we ask them what they're going to do next year, they plan to increase their investment in personalization. And that takes a variety of different factors. One way is dynamic content. And so making sure that content flexes based upon who the audience of that message is. So, you know, there's a lot of energy and excitement around personalization. Second, when you hear right time, I want you to think multi-channel. And the reason being is that 74% of customers prefer different communication channels based upon the context of the communication. So to tease that out, just think about your own experience. Sometimes an email makes the most sense for the delivery of that message versus if I'm getting something in SMS, I automatically think there's some type of urgency or there's a quick call to action. Or if it's coming as an in-app or push notification, I know that it is likely informed by something that I've done or haven't done with the app itself. That is going to be the key to breaking through the noise. You have to have that multi-channel experience. We found on our platform that multi-channel campaigns outperform single-channel campaigns by over 60%. And so if you look at just email, which I'm sure is the primary channel that most of you are using today, it's actually brands say that a multi-channel is produces better results 66% of the time. And so really this is the key to driving conversion. You have to have that multi-channel approach. It shouldn't be aspirational anymore. It should be table stakes. And so that I think is something that I think the data is now bearing out and something that's super important as you think about the future. If you dig into mobile in particular, there's some interesting stats that we saw in our data. Overall, mobile message volume grew to almost 200% last year for us on our platform. And SMS grew over 90%. And when you combine push and SMS, conversion rates were 14%. So extremely powerful when you think about the ability to reach users on that mobile device, because that is really the gateway to a lot of that interaction. Especially for all of you in this room, app development is why you're here, and apps obviously are living on that phone, and so this is an important way to drive them back into your application to continue to build that relationship. The last piece of this puzzle, right, is the right audience. And it's important that when you think about that audience, the audience you need to be adaptive to that audience. Salesforce had a stat that 64% of customers expect their campaigns to adapt to their changing preferences. Another way to say that, given the audience here, is based upon things that users are doing in your application, it should change how you communicate with them. That is super, super important. And that is table stakes now. That is the expectation. And so you're going to need to be able to leverage your own first party data to make sure that your campaigns are adaptable. So when we dug into our platform data, we found that there was a 400% increase in segment triggered in-app messages. So think about that as using something that they did in the application to then drive a further message and continue that communication. And that we found that 31% of brands achieved the highest ROI from being data-driven, using data-driven behavioral triggers. So again, thinking about this, about the ways in which you can use your own data to drive your campaign development. So we have these themes around personalization, around being multi-channel, and about being adaptable. And you might be saying, all right, yeah, I got that. That makes sense to me. But what does that mean in practice? Conceptually, I get that topic, but how do I actually operationalize that? This is a workshop, so we need to make sure that we kind of tease that out. And so what I want to do is I just want to talk about some of the best marketing campaigns that we saw this year and show how these concepts were applied in practice. So the first one I want to talk about is Notion. So I'm sure most people here know about Notion. For those that don't, it's an AI-powered workspace where teams come together to collaborate on documents, and it is a really, really powerful kind of surface to support that. The lifecycle marketing team at Notion was trying to figure out what's the biggest role that we can play to drive value for the business. And so they decided to really focus around feature adoption. And so they built a really unique campaign that focused around driving adoption of new feature functionality. And if you think about the traditional way in which marketing teams market those investments, is kind of a spray and pray approach. It's like, hey, we have a new feature. Go check it out. Here's why it's awesome. And that's good. But you know what's better or best is by making sure that you apply the three principles that we just discussed. And so they built a really targeted campaign that focused around education once a user started to use the feature. And because they were very opinionated around when they reached out, they saw these crazy open rates of almost 50%, and their click-through rates were between 1 and 1.5%. And they were able to translate this into millions of dollars of impact for the business. And so here's the way that they did it. First, when we think about personalization, they built campaigns that so they built the strategy and then they flexed it so they had different branches of the campaign based upon the persona of the user. So just to tease this out, if I'm a marketer and I'm using Notion and for this type of functionality, I want to see what that means for me as a marketer. So the copy, the visuals, the use cases that they called out were optimized for that marketer persona. And then they had an equivalent campaign that was flexed for the finance person that was using that feature. So they were really opinionated around their segmentation. It wasn't just users that used this feature, but it was what type of persona actually used this feature. And then they flexed the copy and the visuals to map to that. Furthermore, they looked at where that user was based, and then they localized the copy for that country. So that way it drove even increased engagement on top of that. You know, one benefit of LLMs and AI is that it makes localization so much easier than it was in the past. And so this was a really powerful way in which they personalized the content of this campaign. Multi-channel. So originally this campaign started as just an email-only campaign, and then they started to layer in-app, and that's when they started to see the increases in conversion rate. And then lastly, they made it adaptable. And the ways in which they did that was what I had kind of said earlier, where they waited until a person actually started to engage with the feature before they put them in that campaign and started to send them information. And so that's what drove all of the strong open rates, because it was super contextual. If you just started using a feature and then you get an email from Notion saying, would you like to learn more around how to get the most out of this feature? Of course, naturally, you're going to open that. Versus if you don't know what the feature is, you don't know why that it even exists, getting a lot of those messages are the quickest way to get, deleted without even getting opened. And so that's how they made it adaptable, as they looked at how people were using the product, and then they built campaigns that were triggered based off of that. All right, so another example is one for Les Mills. Some of you might know Les Mills. For those that don't, Les Mills is a global fitness brand, and they offer both in-person and online fitness classes. Their business, not surprisingly, is very, very seasonal. So there's parts of the year, typically towards the end of the year, first part of the new year, where they see a lot of churn. That's like the time where they see the biggest kind of churn impact. So the team wanted to be really proactive at trying to mitigate that. And so they worked with their data team to segment out users that had the highest propensity for churn, based upon what they've seen, their usage. Like, they kind of knew what the triggers were in their application to know this is a leading indicator that they were going to churn. And so then they carved out those users and built targeted campaigns to drive reactivation. And because of this focus, they were able to prevent churn for 53% of that targeted group, which was way above the benchmark that they had. And most importantly, I don't have this on the slide, but of the 53% that did not churn, 86% of them, they were able to actually convert into an annual subscription. So if you know anything about subscription businesses, getting someone off a month-to-month into an annual has huge impacts on your profitability. And so this was, again, a multi-million-dollar win because they were able to proactively mitigate churn that they typically just dealt with in the past of their business. And the way they were able to do this is because they applied these three themes perfectly. So on the personalization side, rather than just sending them generic emails about new classes, new offerings, they were personalized based upon the activities that they had engaged with in the app previously. So they looked and they saw, oh, this person, they love yoga classes. And so I'm going to be promoting new yoga classes to get them reactivated, re-engaged. And so they use their own user data and activity to drive the offers and CTAs that existed inside of the messages that they sent. Secondly, they evolved into from an email focused campaign only into a multi-channel effort. So they used email, in-app, push notification, and SMS to drive all of these messages. And so that had huge implications in the engagement that they had from their overall outreach. And then lastly, they made this campaign adaptable because they took the model that they initially used to segment out those what customers had the highest propensity to churn, and they made it dynamic. So they're constantly monitoring their app install base to see is there anybody exemplifying similar characteristics? And then as soon as that happens, they get dropped into this campaign automatically, and they start to get these recommendations for reactivation. So what became a one-off, let's see if we can impact churn at the end of the year, became an always-on churn mitigation effort. And so this was a huge success. They actually won an award in New Zealand for this exact campaign. The last one I want to chat about is Zen.com. So Zen.com is a fintech company. They built a mobile application that simplified making transactions, budget management, and transferring money a lot easier. And because of this value prop, they actually generated about 500,000 downloads really quickly. But they realized that they were struggling with the activation and retention side of people who downloaded that app. And so what they looked at was they figured out, okay, we found that when people make a transaction within the first 2 weeks, it creates this aha moment of the power of this application. So they decided to build a campaign that was all about driving them towards completing that transaction within that 14-day window. And because of this, because of the efforts of this campaign, they saw an increase of active users by 15%, and they saw conversion rates increase by 10%, all within the first couple of weeks of this launching. And the way that they did that was through our 3 themes. So from the personalization side, what they did is that they were able to look at what their geography of where they're located, and they were able to provide them with bonuses or promotional offers that were localized. So they were able to make the message more contextual because it was an offer that made sense given where they lived. And then additionally, they also used localization to help them. So they made sure that all those messages were local language. Additionally, they were running a similar campaign using email, and then they layered in SMS and in-app, and it fundamentally changed the impact of what they were able to deliver. And then last but not least, they made the offers adaptable based upon the usage that they had in the app. So if the user was in the app was showing a lot of intent but hadn't complete the first transaction, then the promotional offer they got was smaller. But if somebody download the app, they haven't really done anything with it, then of course they gave them a more attractive offer to get them into the app. And as a result, they were able to really maximize the impact and maximize the ROI because they weren't giving one-size-fits-all promotions, but they were adjusting it based upon the likelihood that they were going to convert. And so this has kind of huge implications for them and their ability to retain the customers that they got to download the application themselves. So now we've talked about the themes, and I've given you some examples of what those themes mean in practice. I'd love to have a conversation now. What are some of the challenges that maybe you're facing? So now that you've seen this, we talked a little bit about personalization at the beginning, but what are some of your biggest challenges when it comes to personalizing messages at scale? Anybody feel brave? Please.
Thank you. Well, I work in a medical company, like medical app. So for us, personalization is quite hard because of the data privacy protection. So we can't, frankly, share a lot of information with platforms, like certain platforms that we have. So we need to either mask it or sort of send, some fake data that we know the value of, but the platform can't know that. Um, we can use that to build segments, for example, because we know the values, but then we can't use this data to actually do the personalization. And that for me is the biggest challenge, because I do want to, appeal to people and kind of talk to them about their problems that we know of. But that's kind of the privacy.
Yeah, I think that one's a real common one, and again, I think uh, those rules are always changing, which makes it really challenging there. And I think that's where, in some cases you got to lean on software to potentially help you kind of navigate some of that complexity. That's a really good one. Anybody else want any ideas around challenges of personalization? All right. The next question I had is what if your customers are engaging on other channels you're not investing in? Would you know? Does anybody fall in that bucket? I think, again, a lot of people, right? It's like, oh, I use email. Like that's the first channel that everybody lights up. But, have you experimented with in-app? Like, do you know the power of SMS? Have you experimented with those tools? I think that one's one where I think I personally undervalued the power of some of these other channels because I just didn't have. I didn't. It's kind of, you didn't know what you didn't know. Like is it, and so hopefully some of the data here kind of helps assuage some of those concerns. The last question is, how confident are you that you're reaching the right audience with your messaging efforts today? I'm guessing if you're here, you probably have some questions. I mean, that's probably why. Is there anything that maybe people that have started on this journey that has given you more conviction? Maybe that's a better way to frame this question. Anything that you've done? I think one thing that's really important is thinking about the framework that you use and the tools that you have at your disposal. Because I think in the end, a lot of these concepts, in practice are important. Like I don't think anything I've said today is not something that I think you would push back too hard on. But I do think that a lot of times people don't act on these because of the difficulty in execution. And so what I want to talk a little bit around is what's a framework and what is some ways in which tooling can help you implement some of the concepts that we just discussed here. And so I'm going to walk through this kind of visual. This is one that we share a lot with our customers. And it's an important way to think about the right process in building these concepts of personalization, multi-channel, and adaptability into your campaigns. And so the way that we think about it at Customer I/O is that there's 6 important steps. And no matter what vertical your app is in, you're likely going to need to go through this process in helping to build campaigns if you want them to be impactful. And the way I think about impactful is, are they engaging and do they drive conversion? So the first step in this process centers around gathering your data together. And this is where you need to have access to your first-party data and being able to action off of it. I think in the end, again, it is becoming more and more challenging to use third parties and to have the confidence that, you're going to be able, that data is going to be clear and is going to give you the information that you're looking for. And so I do think that there's this trend towards leveraging first-party data is becoming more and more important. And so because of that, at Customer I/O, one thing that we try to do is make sure that we build simple ways in which you can integrate with that first-party data. And so, a lot of people here might be using a CDP. If you're not, like, no big deal. We effectively have built in a CDP into our platform. So what that means is you can use native connectors to connect to your data warehouse. connect to your website. And all of that data can get pushed into Customer IO. And that's what allows you to build these rich profiles of the users of your application. But you need to have a way to ingest that data easily and effectively so that you can then action off of that. So step one in trying to build campaigns that we've talked about today, you need to have access to your first party data. Once you have that data in your platform or the tool that you're using, you need to be able to organize that quickly and easily. And the best way to, and so another way to kind of think about that is, how can you segment your audience into these granular groups where you have some understanding around what the objective is to move the needle with them? And that's where the personalization piece is super, super important. So you're able to kind of take all your understanding of your user base and carve it out into these very distinct groups that you can then build campaigns for. Inside Customer IO, we provide that the tools you need to build those audiences quickly and easily. Because we've helped you ingest all that first-party data, you have all of this information that you can then segment off of. So you can filter it really easy, really quickly. And then we're right in the process right now of building AI that will actually do a lot of that in an automated way for you. And so you can either be proactive around, these are the criteria that I have to create my segment. Alternatively, if you know there's certain behaviors that you're capturing in your application, you can also trigger messages and campaigns based upon those actions. So I kind of think about it as, you can be proactive in building audiences, or you can be reactive based upon the actions that they're taking. But you need to have tooling that allows you to do that seamlessly. Once you have those audiences in place, then it becomes really, really important to actually create these powerful messages that are going to resonate with they're going to resonate with those audiences. And so it's important that you have the right tools to do that, because as we said earlier, it's important that those messages need to be personalized in some form or fashion to actually break through the noise. And so at Customer IO, we capture all of this data for you, and you build these rich profiles. Those then become attributes that you can then bake into your messages that help create the personalization in a scalable way. So using Liquid, you can actually bake all of that into the copy that you're creating. And that is something that is scalable, it's easy to do, and really provides that lever for you to build personalization as a part of all of the communications that you offer. Additionally, we think that, the messages, the storytelling that takes place is both in the copy, but also in the visuals that you provide. So what you see here are some really powerful, well-designed kind of in-app messages. And the reason why you can build messages like this in Customer IO is because we give you a ton of flexibility around the editing experience. So I don't know how close you are to email development, but we bought Parcel. It's a dedicated, email development tool about 2 years ago. And so it made email development for a more technical mindset so much easier. And then what we've done is since we acquired that company, we've taken that skill set and that understanding and tried to push the limits around, well, how can we make it as easy to create content for non-technical people as technical people? And so, a lot of companies in our space use the B editor as the kind of drag and drop default, which we have in our platform. But we're also building a second tool that leverages the insights from Parcel to create an even more powerful drag and drop editor that you can use not only for email, but also for in-app. And so we believe that, the way that you design messages is a way to drive differentiation. It's a way to drive engagement. And so we're investing really heavily in giving you the tools that you need to design these really, really powerful messages. So once you have your audience in place, and then you have your messages built, you got to get those messages out, and those messages need to be contextual. And so we are able to seamlessly automate all of that message delivery across all the channels that you need, whether that's SMS, push, email, like we do it all. And so we can support all of that through a single view. Because again, a lot of people try to hack together some of the campaign development with various point solutions. Like I might use one solution for SMS and one solution for email. That just makes your job so much harder. Versus if you can have a single platform that can drive all of that automation and you can think about your campaigns in an omni-channel way, that's going to make your job a lot easier. And we offer a visual workflow builder. So it makes campaign development so much easier. So I think we've all frustratingly worked through, building campaigns in like a HubSpot or a Marketo. And it's really, really hard versus this visual nature of building campaigns that are multi-channel in nature is so much easier in a platform like Customer.io. And then the fifth step is around optimization. So, we all have built campaigns and, you never nail it on the first try. Like there's just no way that you're going to get everything exactly right. So you need to make sure that you have experimentation built upon the work that you're doing. And so we have native A/B testing tools baked into our platform to make it easy for you to do that successfully. And then lastly, you got to take a step back and you got to look at how is performance overall for all of the work that I'm doing. And am I delivering that, revenue impact, that user growth impact, and where do the opportunities exist? And so by having a single dashboard point of view of how my broader campaign efforts are working is going to give you a lot of insights to guide your future strategy. So you don't have that apprehension around what am I going to do in 2025 or what am I going to do next quarter? Because you're going to have the data to drive some of that decision making. And the benefit of having this all integrated is that it creates this flywheel effect for you and for your teams. Because as you build these campaigns and you assess them, you're gonna learn more about your customers. You're gonna gather more data about them. That's all gonna get appended into the profiles that you created. And then that's gonna give you a richer data set to organize and segment your base even further. And you can start this over and over again. And so by integrating on a single platform, it just facilitates this process of iteration and simplicity and execution. And that's how you can move faster and you can do more for the apps that you're trying to grow and build. So, to wrap things up, because I wanted to, I'm happy to leave some time for Q&A as well. But I think the key takeaways that I would, ask you as you think about getting ready for 2025 is first, go back and assess what you're currently doing today and see if you're hitting on personalization, being multi-channel, and being adaptable. So do an audit of the campaigns that you have. I think you'll very quickly either one, build conviction that you're doing the right things, or two, you're going to realize, hey, I have some gaps. If you have some gaps, then, feel free to come and talk to us and we can help strategize with you on what's the right way to do that. And is there technology that will make things easier for you? Because I think in the end, to do any of these things at scale, it's going to be gated in some respects by the technology stack that you're using and the applications that you're leveraging. And so if you feel like you have some gaps, like come chat with us. I think that we can work within a variety of different technology stacks where your focuses are, what your budget is. So we're going to be here. We're down booth number 15. You can come chat with me. I have two of my colleagues here as well. Would love to kind of dig in with you more and help you understand where the opportunities lie. And then lastly, it's always important to stay close to what's happening in the market. And so I'd love to have you all. If you want, you can download our state of messaging report. I think it'll be a great asset for you to leverage to try to understand more around what's happening in the market, where best practices exist, what you need to do to be successful. So, please download that, and it's a free download. Would love to kind of get that detailed information in front of you.